Pam arrived at the luxurious seaside Grand Hotel just after sunset. The sky was painted with soft orange and pink shades, and a cool breeze came from the ocean. She had spent the entire day traveling for a business conference, and all she wanted now was a hot shower, some room service, and a few hours of rest. Her shoulders ached from carrying her laptop bag and suitcase through airports and taxis. The hotel lobby was glowing with golden lights, its marble floors shining like glass. Behind the front desk, two receptionists stood chatting quietly. One of them noticed Pam approaching and gave her a polite, tight smile, the kind people give when they're forced to be nice. Pam set her small suitcase beside her and greeted them softly. "Good evening. I have a reservation under the name Pam Bondi." The receptionist quickly looked at her from head to toe before typing on the computer. Her tone changed slightly, sharper now. Let me see. "Bondi, you said?" "Yes," Pam replied, tired but still polite. The woman clicked a few more times, then frowned. "I don't see your name here." Pam reached into her bag and pulled out her printed confirmation. "I booked this room 2 weeks ago. I even got a call from the hotel yesterday to confirm my arrival." The receptionist took the paper without even saying thank you and scanned it briefly. Her expression didn't change. "Ma'am, this says a presidential suite. Are you sure this is correct?" "That suite is reserved for our executive guests. It's not a standard room." Pam smiled faintly, used to this kind of assumption. "Yes, that's correct. That's the room I booked." The receptionist looked her over again. From her simple travel clothes to her worn-out shoes, Pam hadn't bothered to dress fancy for the flight. She wore a loose sweater and dark jeans, her hair tied back in a bun. Nothing about her screamed executive. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," the woman said coldly. "This kind of suite isn't usually available to general guests." Pam kept her calm. "There's no misunderstanding. Please check again." The second receptionist, a young man standing nearby, whispered something under his breath and smirked. Pam noticed it but didn't react. She'd dealt with enough people who judged her by appearances. After another minute, the woman sighed. "Well, it says your name here after all. But the suite is under special approval. Did someone at the company authorize this for you?" Pam met her eyes and said quietly, "Yes, I did." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, not understanding. "Excuse me?" Pam didn't explain further. She simply wanted her key and some peace, but the woman wasn't ready to let it go. "You'll have to wait in the lounge for a few minutes while we verify this with management," she said stiffly, turning away before Pam could reply. Pam stood there, feeling the sting of embarrassment rising in her chest. The lobby was busy, and a few other guests were nearby. She could hear them whispering. One woman glanced at her and then at the front desk, clearly wondering what was going on. Pam took a deep breath and stepped aside. She didn't want to create a scene. Years of experience had taught her the power of patience. Still, it hurt to be treated this way, like she didn't belong, like she was pretending to be someone important. While she waited, a tall man in a dark suit approached the counter. The same receptionist greeted him with a wide smile. "Good evening, Mr. Turner. Welcome back to the Seaside Grand." The contrast was sharp. The man was dressed well, carrying a sleek leather bag. The staff offered him bottled water, called him sir, and even sent someone to carry his luggage. Pam stood only a few feet away, invisible in her own moment of quiet humiliation. The young male staff member looked at her again and whispered something to his colleague. They both laughed quietly. Pam caught a few words, something about people trying to sneak into rich spaces. She turned away and looked out the window. The ocean waves were calm, reflecting the lights from the nearby pier. Her chest felt heavy, but she didn't let her expression change. A few minutes later, a bellhop approached her. "Ma'am, they said you'll need to wait until the manager comes down." Pam thanked him gently. She sat on a leather couch in the lobby and took out her phone. She opened her emails to double-check her booking confirmation. Again. Everything was in order. She had personally arranged the suite for the upcoming business summit. The irony made her smile sadly. The very hotel that was treating her like an outsider would, in less than 24 hours, host the biggest corporate event of the year, an event she was leading. Pam Bondi wasn't just attending the conference. She was the president of the entire organization hosting it. But she didn't say a word. Not yet. After nearly 20 minutes, a middle-aged man in a black suit walked briskly toward the front desk. His name tag said Edward, manager. The receptionist leaned over and whispered something to him while pointing at Pam. His expression shifted slightly, then he approached her. "Ma'am," he said with a polite but distant tone, "I understand there's some confusion about your booking." "There shouldn't be," Pam replied calmly, handing him the same paper the receptionist had ignored. "Here's the confirmation along with my company's receipt." Edward glanced at it, then at her. "This is indeed the presidential suite, Ms. Bondi. It's quite an exclusive room. Are you sure you were the one who made this booking personally?" "Yes," Pam said. "Every detail of it." He hesitated. "I'll need to verify this with our executive office." "Please wait here." She nodded, though inside she was growing tired. The long day, the flight delays, and now this. Being judged just because she didn't look like the kind of person who could afford or deserve such a room. As the manager stepped away to make his call, the receptionist gave her another dismissive glance, whispering to her colleague again. Pam caught a quiet laugh and the word mistaken identity. She wanted to say something sharp but held it in. She'd spent her career learning when to speak and when to let people reveal who they truly were. After a few minutes, Edward returned, his face pale and slightly flustered. He approached quickly. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his tone now entirely different, respectful, careful. "I just confirmed everything. Please accept my apologies for the misunderstanding. Your suite is ready." The receptionists exchanged confused looks. Edward continued. "We didn't realize you were the keynote guest for the Global Business Leadership Summit. Our staff wasn't informed of your position." Pam smiled faintly but didn't gloat. "That's all right. Mistakes happen." Edward immediately offered to escort her personally. "Let me take you to your suite, please, and we'll have complimentary service sent up right away." Pam thanked him and followed as he guided her to the elevator. The staff who had mocked her earlier now stood awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Inside the elevator, Edward tried to make small talk. "We're honored to have you here, Ms. Bondi. I apologize again for the inconvenience. I'll make sure the staff is reminded to treat every guest with the utmost respect." Pam simply nodded. "I appreciate that." When they reached the top floor, the doors opened to a quiet, private hallway. The presidential suite door was tall, with gold detailing and a view overlooking the sea. Edward opened it for her, revealing a stunning living space, marble floors, velvet couches, and a balcony that caught the soft moonlight. He handed her the key card and bowed slightly before leaving. Pam stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. The silence was peaceful. She dropped her bag on the sofa and took a long breath. She walked toward the balcony and opened the glass door. The wind from the ocean brushed against her face. For a moment, she just stood there, watching the waves and lights below. Her tiredness melted slowly into reflection. She thought about the way people judge others so quickly, based on clothes, tone, posture, or a first glance. How a few moments earlier, she had been treated like she didn't belong, and now the same people were probably whispering apologies behind her back. She wasn't angry, not really. She was disappointed. Tomorrow, when she stood on stage as the president facing hundreds of executives, including the hotel's management, she knew she wouldn't mention what happened tonight. She didn't need to. Her position would speak louder than any confrontation ever could. Still, she made a quiet promise to herself. No matter how high she rose, she would never let herself forget what it felt like to be underestimated. Because that feeling, that sting of quiet humiliation, had power. It reminded her to treat everyone with respect, whether they wore a designer suit or simple jeans after a long flight. Pam turned back into the room, picked up her phone, and texted her assistant. "I've checked in safely. Long day. See you at the conference tomorrow." Then she smiled faintly, knowing tomorrow would be different. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the presidential suite. The ocean sparkled outside, calm and endless. Pam woke up early, still thinking about the night before. She sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, rubbing her hands together, replaying every word from the hotel lobby in her mind. The memory wasn't painful anymore, just clear. She wasn't the kind of person who held grudges, but she believed in remembering lessons. Pam walked to the balcony and breathed in the salty air. Below her, the city was waking up. The honking of taxis, the laughter of tourists, the distant sound of waves hitting the shore. Today was a big day. The Global Business Leadership Summit would begin in just a few hours. Leaders from different companies, policymakers, and hundreds of young professionals would be attending. and she was the president hosting it all. After a quiet breakfast, Pam dressed in a crisp navy blue suit. It was simple but elegant. She tied her hair neatly and put on small silver earrings, nothing flashy, just enough to look composed. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she smiled faintly. She didn't look like someone who wanted to prove a point, but deep inside she knew that life would take care of that on its own. At 9 o'clock, she received a call from her assistant, who was waiting downstairs. Pam grabbed her folder, slipped on her shoes, and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened on the lobby floor, a few staff members turned to look at her. Their eyes widened slightly. The same receptionist from last night straightened up quickly behind the counter. The smile on her face looked forced, nervous even. She whispered something to her colleague, who stood still and didn't say a word this time. Pam gave them both a calm nod and walked past without saying anything. Her assistant greeted her near the entrance, unaware of the story behind those quiet looks. Together, they stepped into the black car waiting outside. As they drove to the convention center, Pam's phone buzzed with messages. The guest list was confirmed, speeches were printed, and the press team was setting up the stage. She felt the familiar mix of pressure and excitement that came with leadership. When she arrived at the venue, cameras were already flashing. People were moving in all directions, technicians checking sound systems, organizers arranging chairs, and journalists preparing their questions. As Pam stepped inside, several people turned to greet her warmly. "Good morning, Madam President." One of the coordinators called out, smiling brightly. Others followed, shaking her hand, thanking her for her leadership. She smiled, keeping her calm grace. But deep down, she couldn't help remembering how just last night, the same level of respect had been replaced by doubt and judgment. That's how quickly things change, she thought. Inside the main hall, banners hung high above the stage, reading Global Business Leadership Summit, 10th Annual Conference. The room was filled with rows of chairs, screens, and fresh flowers along the aisles. The stage had her name on the large LED screen. Her assistant handed her a cup of coffee. "Everything's ready. You're scheduled to start your opening remarks in 20 minutes. Pam nodded and glanced around. "And the hotel staff? Did they confirm arrangements for tonight's reception?" "Yes, ma'am. The Seaside Grand has finalized everything. The general manager called personally to confirm. They're honored to host the dinner." Pam smiled lightly at the word, honored. It was strange how the same people could treat someone differently once they knew their title. 15 minutes later, she stood backstage waiting for the announcer to introduce her. She could hear the low hum of the crowd. Hundreds of people from around the country chatting, taking pictures, waiting for the event to begin. The announcer's voice filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the president of the Global Business Leadership Council, Ms. Pam Bondi." Applause filled the hall. Pam walked onto the stage with calm, steady steps. The lights were bright, almost blinding for a moment, but she could feel the warmth of the crowd. She took a deep breath, smiled, and began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. It's truly wonderful to see so many bright minds gathered here today." Her voice was calm but carried strength. She spoke about the challenges of leadership, the importance of humility, and how success wasn't just about position. It was about purpose. People listened closely, nodding, taking notes, hanging on to her words. As she talked, her thoughts drifted briefly to the hotel lobby. She didn't name anyone or mention what had happened, but she found a way to include the message in her speech. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we meet people who underestimate us, not because of what we've done, but because of what they see or don't see. And in those moments, our greatest strength isn't to argue or to prove. It's to stay kind, to stay steady, and let time reveal the truth." The room grew quiet for a moment. Her words landed deeper than she expected. Then came the applause, warm, sincere, lasting. By the time her speech ended, Pam could see faces lit with admiration. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and her assistant looked proud from the side of the stage. She bowed her head slightly and stepped away, her heart calm. Later that afternoon, she attended meetings and press interviews. Every conversation reminded her why she loved her work, the chance to create change, to give others opportunities she once had to fight for. By evening, she returned to the Seaside Grand Hotel, tired but satisfied. The lobby looked different this time. The air felt lighter, almost welcoming. The same receptionist stood at the desk, her posture straight and her expression nervous. As Pam walked past, the woman hesitated, then called softly, "Ms. Bondi?" Pam turned to her. "Yes?" The woman's voice trembled slightly. I wanted to apologize for last night. I shouldn't have assumed anything. It was unprofessional, and I'm truly sorry." Pam paused, looking at her. The apology seemed sincere. She nodded gently. "Thank you. I appreciate that." The receptionist swallowed hard. "I hope you'll enjoy your stay. We've arranged everything perfectly for the dinner tonight." Pam smiled faintly. "I'm sure you have." As she walked toward the elevator, a few other staff members looked at her with quiet respect. They'd clearly been told who she was now, but what mattered more to Pam was that they'd also seen who she wasn't last night. A person pretending, a guest trying to take advantage. In a way, she was glad it happened. It reminded her that kindness wasn't just a principle for speeches. It was something to be practiced when no one's watching, even when people don't deserve it. Back in her suite, she took a few minutes to rest before the evening reception. She sat by the window again, watching the sea. The light was fading, the waves turning silver under the setting sun. Her assistant soon knocked on the door to remind her about the dinner downstairs. Pam changed into an elegant black dress, simple yet graceful. She looked in the mirror and smiled, not at her reflection, but at how far she'd come from the girl who once doubted she'd belong in any boardroom. When she entered the grand ballroom that night, the place was buzzing with life. Guests in formal wear filled the space. Music played softly in the background, and the hotel staff moved swiftly between tables, serving drinks and appetizers. Pam walked through the crowd, greeting guests. The manager, Edward, approached her immediately. "Ms. Bondi, it's a true honor to host your event. Please accept my deepest apologies for the misunderstanding yesterday. I assure you our staff will undergo additional hospitality training." Pam smiled politely. "Thank you, Edward. That's thoughtful of you." He nodded quickly. "Your grace in handling the situation speaks volumes." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she turned toward the crowd and began mingling. The night went smoothly. Guests laughed, conversations flowed, and speeches were made. At one point, Pam noticed the same receptionist from before standing near the entrance, watching quietly. Their eyes met briefly. The woman looked away, embarrassed. Pam gave her a small nod, almost like saying, "It's okay." As the night went on, people toasted to success, unity, and leadership. Pam's speech from earlier was still being talked about. Several guests came to her, saying how her words about humility and patience touched them. It was strange, she thought, how life had a way of creating its own lessons. Sometimes, people needed to see a real example to understand what respect truly meant. When the evening finally ended, Pam walked back to her suite. She took off her shoes, feeling the soft carpet under her feet. She looked out at the sea one last time before bed. She didn't feel pride or revenge, just peace. Because tomorrow, when the world moved on to another day, the story wouldn't be about a guest shamed by hotel staff. It would be about a leader who handled disrespect with quiet dignity, and that, she thought, was far more powerful than any title. The next morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains of Pam's suite, falling across the coffee table where a few scattered notes and her speech papers still lay. The previous night's dinner had gone perfectly. Guests had praised the event, the hotel had redeemed itself, and the atmosphere had been full of laughter and respect. But Pam didn't wake up feeling triumphant. She woke up thoughtful. She sat up slowly, stretched, and reached for her cup of water from the nightstand. There was a calmness in the air, a kind of silence that made her think. Maybe it was the sea breeze, or maybe it was the way life had quieted after the chaos of the day before. Pam went out to the balcony and leaned on the railing. The view was breathtaking. The morning sun glimmered over the water, and fishing boats were already out at sea. Below her, the hotel staff were setting up breakfast tables by the pool. She could see people moving fast, carrying trays, arranging flowers, and checking details. It reminded her of her younger years, when she too had worked behind a counter, answering phones and dealing with customers who barely noticed her name tag. She understood what it felt like to be tired, overworked, and judged. Maybe that's why she never yelled or reacted harshly, even when she was disrespected. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was her assistant, reminding her about the morning panel discussion. Pam smiled and texted back, On my way. She got ready quickly, tying her hair into a neat bun and wearing a soft cream-colored suit. Before leaving, she took one last glance at the ocean and whispered quietly to herself, "Let's make today better than yesterday." Down in the lobby, she was greeted warmly by Edward, the hotel manager. He looked more relaxed today, but his tone was careful and respectful. "Good morning, Ms. Bondi. I hope you rested well." Pam nodded. "I did. Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I truly appreciate how understanding you've been. The staff told me you treated them kindly, even when we failed to do the same." "That says a lot," Pam smiled softly. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn." Her driver arrived and she left for the conference center. The city streets were waking up, the air filled with the smell of coffee, the sound of honking cars, and people rushing to work. Pam watched from the car window, feeling a sense of quiet gratitude. When she reached the venue, she was greeted by familiar faces. Some were colleagues she had known for years. Others were new professionals who looked up to her. They surrounded her, asking questions, sharing ideas, and thanking her for the inspiring words from yesterday. But one young woman stood out. She looked nervous as she approached Pam. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say your story yesterday really touched me," she said softly. "I've been trying to grow in my company, but people keep underestimating me. Hearing your words reminded me to stay patient." Pam's eyes softened. "Don't let anyone's assumptions shape your confidence. People can only see what they understand. Sometimes it takes time for them to see who you really are." The young woman nodded, smiling with new hope. Pam watched her walk away and thought how amazing it was, how a few kind words could change someone's direction. The panel discussion began soon after. Pam sat with other leaders on the stage, answering questions about challenges in business, ethics, and leadership. The moderator asked her a question that made her pause. "Ms. Bondi, as a woman leading one of the largest councils in the country, how do you handle situations where people doubt your authority or misjudge you?" Pam took a breath before replying. "I've learned that power isn't about who shouts the loudest or demands respect. It's about how you carry yourself when no one expects greatness from you. The moments that test you, the unfair ones, are the ones that show your true leadership." The audience clapped. Cameras flashed. After the discussion, Pam spent the afternoon in meetings, interviews, and short talks with entrepreneurs. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the hotel. She wondered about the young receptionist who had treated her coldly. Was she embarrassed? Was she reflecting? Or was she just trying to forget? Pam believed in accountability, but she also believed in kindness. She decided she would speak to the staff before leaving town, not to confront them, but to teach them something valuable. That evening, after all the sessions ended, Pam returned to the Seaside Grand. The lobby was quieter than usual. A pianist was playing soft music near the lounge, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Edward approached her again, greeting her politely. "Welcome back, Miss Bondi. May I assist you with anything?" Pam smiled. "Actually, yes. Could you ask the front desk staff from last night to meet me for a few minutes tomorrow morning before I check out? Just a short talk." He looked curious but agreed immediately. "Of course. I'll make sure they're available." The next morning, Pam woke up early again. She packed her things slowly, feeling calm and light. Before leaving her suite, she looked around one last time. The room had become more than just a space. It had been a silent witness to her journey from judgment to respect. When she reached the lobby, Edward and 2 staff members were already waiting near a side lounge. The same receptionist from that first night stood there, looking uneasy but willing to face her. Pam walked over with a kind expression. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning, ma'am," the receptionist replied, her voice low. Pam gestured for everyone to sit. "I wanted to speak with you before I leave, not as a complaint but as a conversation." The woman nodded nervously. Pam continued gently. "I know that night was uncomfortable for everyone, but I want you to know, I didn't take it personally. I understand what it's like to work long shifts, to be tired, and to face people who sometimes aren't patient." The woman blinked, surprised. "You're being very kind, ma'am. But I really was wrong. I judged you unfairly," Pam smiled. "We've all done that at some point. What matters is whether we learn from it." Edward listened quietly, clearly impressed by her calmness. Pam went on, "You work in hospitality. which is about making every guest feel seen and respected. It doesn't matter who they are, what they wear, or what room they book. You never know who that person might be, or what they're going through. The way you treat people can change their whole day, sometimes even their life. The receptionist's eyes glistened slightly. You're right. I'll remember that, Pam nodded. That's all I wanted, to remind you that respect should never depend on status. They all stood up. Edward shook her hand, deeply grateful. You've taught us more in 10 minutes than most training sessions ever could, he said sincerely. Pam smiled. I'm glad. Before leaving, she looked around the lobby one last time. The marble floors, the golden lights, it all looked the same, but it felt different now. There was warmth where there had once been coldness. As she stepped outside, her driver opened the car door. Pam took one last deep breath of the ocean air. The waves were rolling gently, steady and endless, like life itself. On the way to the airport, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Edward. It read, Thank you, Ms. Bondi. Our staff won't forget this experience. You've reminded us that leadership isn't about authority. It's about grace. Pam smiled as she read it. She looked out the window, watching the city fade into the distance. Maybe, she thought, every challenge was really a hidden opportunity to show the best of who we are. She didn't need anyone's apology to feel validated anymore. She knew her worth, and that was enough. As the car moved closer to the airport, Pam closed her eyes for a moment. She felt peaceful, not because of the title she held, but because she had handled something small with humanity. Sometimes the smallest tests reveal the biggest truths, and in her quiet way, Pam had passed that test with grace, patience, and strength. Pam's flight home was early, and the morning was quiet when she reached the airport. The soft hum of announcements filled the air, and travelers moved in calm lines, clutching coffee cups and luggage. As she walked through the terminal, she thought about the past few days, how they had started with judgment and ended with understanding. She didn't see herself as a hero, just someone who handled a difficult moment with patience, but she also knew that even the smallest experiences could ripple out into something bigger. The way the hotel staff had changed their tone after realizing who she was had reminded her how easily people measure worth by appearance or title. It bothered her, not out of anger, but from a sense of sadness. Pam found her gate, sat down near the window, and watched the planes taxi across the runway. Her assistant joined her a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You were incredible this week, her assistant said with a warm smile. Everyone's talking about your speech, Pam chuckled softly. I'm glad they took something from it. But you know it wasn't just for them. I needed the reminder too. Her assistant looked curious. What kind of reminder? Pam sipped her coffee and thought for a moment. That no matter how much success we have, humility must stay with us. And that kindness, especially when people don't deserve it, is what defines real strength. Her assistant nodded thoughtfully. That's very true. When the boarding announcement came, Pam stood up and gathered her things. The flight home was peaceful. She looked out the window as the plane climbed above the clouds, the endless sky stretching all around her. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax completely. Back in her hometown, Pam's schedule quickly filled again. Meetings, reports, planning for upcoming projects. But the story from the Seaside Grand Hotel stayed in her mind. Not as a painful memory, but as a quiet lesson. A few days later, she received an unexpected email. It was from Edward, the hotel manager. Dear Ms. Bondi, it read, I wanted to personally thank you again for your kindness and patience during your stay. I've taken your words to heart. We've started a new training program for our staff called See the Person. It's focused on treating every guest with equal respect, no matter their appearance or background. I thought you'd like to know your experience inspired something meaningful here. Pam smiled as she read it. She sat back in her chair and whispered, That's how change begins. Over the next few weeks, she found herself thinking often about empathy, the way people forget to see beyond what's visible. In her meetings, she began bringing this up more often. She started workshops for young leaders in her organization, focusing on emotional intelligence, compassion, and integrity. At one of these sessions, a young man stood up and asked, Ma'am, with all the challenges you've faced, what's the hardest part of being a leader? Pam paused before answering. The hardest part, she said, is remembering to stay human when the world expects you to be perfect. Titles come and go, but the way we make people feel lasts much longer. The room fell silent for a moment. Her words sank in deeply. Later that day, after the workshop, Pam walked alone through the hallway of her office. The walls were lined with photographs from past events, showing smiling faces, awards, and milestones. But one picture caught her eye, a photo from her first day as an employee many years ago. She looked so young and unsure, standing at the edge of a group photo, almost invisible. She remembered that version of herself, the one who worked late nights, doubting if she'd ever be noticed. And she smiled. It wasn't success that had changed her. It was the experiences that taught her what mattered most. One afternoon, her phone rang. It was Edward again. He sounded both nervous and excited. "Ms. Bondi, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he began. "Not at all, Edward. How are things at the hotel?" "They're going really well," he said. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. We're organizing a hospitality seminar next month, and we'd be honored if you'd give a short talk. We'd like our staff to hear directly from the person who reminded us what respect truly means." Pam was quiet for a moment, touched by the invitation. "I'd be happy to," she said finally. "Just send me the details." When the day of the seminar arrived, Pam returned to the Seaside Grand. It felt strange walking through the same revolving doors that had once felt cold and unwelcoming. But this time the air was different. Staff members smiled warmly, greeted her sincerely, and the entire atmosphere felt lighter. Edward welcomed her personally, introducing her to a room full of employees, front desk attendants, cleaners, servers, and managers. Some faces she recognized. Others were new, but the energy in the room was genuine. Pam stood at the front of the small conference room, holding the microphone with a gentle smile. "Thank you for inviting me back," she began. "The last time I stood in this building, I was a tired traveler who just wanted a room. What happened that night reminded me, and maybe all of us, that respect is not something we give only when it's earned. It's something we offer freely because it shows who we are." She looked around the room, seeing heads nodding and eyes watching closely. We never really know who we're serving. A person in old jeans might be the next business leader. A tired parent might be a doctor saving lives. Or maybe they're just someone having a bad day. What they need most isn't judgment, it's kindness. The room was silent. Some of the staff looked emotional. Pam continued softly. "That night could have ended in anger, but it didn't. It ended in understanding. And seeing how you've used that experience to make real changes here means more to me than you can imagine." When she finished, the audience clapped warmly. Edward came up to thank her, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given us something that no training ever could. You reminded us that our work isn't just about rooms or service, it's about people." After the event, several employees came up to her to express their gratitude. The receptionist from that first night was there too. She looked different, more confident, more at peace. She approached Pam and said quietly, "I don't know if you remember me, but I was the one who made that mistake when you checked in." Pam smiled gently. "Of course I remember." The woman took a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you something. That night changed me. I realized how much I let my assumptions lead me. I'm not proud of it, but it taught me to slow down and see people differently. I've been training new hires now, and I tell them that story all the time. I just wanted you to know." Pam felt a warmth in her chest. "That means more than you think. You've turned a mistake into a message. That's what growth looks like." They shared a quiet smile before the woman stepped away to help another guest. As Pam left the hotel that afternoon, she walked along the beach nearby. The wind was cool and the waves rolled gently onto the sand. She thought about how life had come full circle, from being judged to being invited back to teach about respect. It wasn't pride she felt. It was gratitude. She realized that life's most powerful lessons often come wrapped in uncomfortable moments. And if we respond with patience instead of anger, those moments can transform not just us, but everyone around us. As the sun began to set, Pam took out her phone and snapped a picture of the ocean. She sent it to her assistant with a short message. "Some lessons are worth repeating. We teach best through example." Her assistant replied almost instantly, "You've done that better than anyone I know." Pam smiled, put her phone away, and stood watching the horizon until the last bit of sunlight disappeared. She knew her journey wasn't about proving herself anymore. It was about reminding others that dignity and humility could exist together. And somewhere deep down, she also knew that the story that began with shame had quietly turned into one of grace. The days after Pam's return from the seaside Grand Hotel were calm, yet quietly meaningful. She went back to her daily work, filled with back-to-back meetings, community projects, and speeches. Life seemed to have resumed its normal rhythm, but deep inside something had shifted. The experience at that hotel had left an invisible mark. A small, constant reminder that respect and humility mattered far more than titles or status ever could. It wasn't just about what happened to her. It was about how easily people forget to see each other as human beings first. Pam often thought about that first night at the hotel. The uncomfortable glances, the dismissive tone, and the subtle looks from other guests. But instead of feeling anger, she felt grateful. That night had given her one of the most valuable lessons of her life. A few weeks later, she was invited to speak at a national leadership conference. It was one of the biggest gatherings of executives, entrepreneurs, and public figures in the country. She hesitated at first. She didn't want to give another corporate speech filled with fancy words and empty promises. But when she read the theme of the event, Leadership with Heart, she knew she had something genuine to share. On the day of the conference, the auditorium was packed. Rows of chairs filled the grand hall, and a large screen behind the stage displayed her name and title. Pam stood backstage for a few moments before walking out. She took a deep breath, feeling both calm and nervous. When she stepped onto the stage, the crowd applauded politely. She looked around the room, hundreds of faces watching, waiting to hear her speak. But she didn't start with facts or numbers. Instead, she began with a story. "Not long ago," she said, her voice steady, "I checked into a hotel after a long, tiring day. I was dressed casually, a bit messy, and clearly not looking my best. The staff at the front desk barely looked at me. They spoke with impatience, made assumptions, and treated me as if I didn't belong there. But what they didn't know," she paused, "was that I was the president of the company hosting their next big event." There were small gasps and murmurs in the audience. Pam smiled gently. It wasn't their mistake that hurt me. It was the realization that people judge faster than they understand. That moment reminded me of how easy it is to forget kindness, especially when we think someone has nothing to offer us. She went on to describe how she revealed her identity later, how their behavior changed instantly, and how that shift exposed something much deeper about society. The hall was completely silent as she spoke. No one checked their phones, no one whispered. Her words felt personal, not rehearsed. She concluded, "True leadership isn't about how people treat you when they know your title. It's about how you treat others when they have none. Respect should never depend on recognition." The audience rose to their feet in applause. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was emotional. People stood, some even wiping their eyes. Pam smiled humbly, thanked them, and stepped off the stage quietly. Backstage, one of the conference organizers rushed to her. "That was powerful," he said. "You just changed how people see leadership."